What would you do if fate placed you in command of only 300 men, and before you stood not a rival army, but a living sea of enemies? Hundreds of thousands strong. Perhaps even 1,000,000 according to ancient memory. Would you cast down your shield and pray to survive? Would you retreat into the mountains and vanish from history? Or would you stand fast and let your bones become the foundation of legend? At Thermopylae in 480 BCE, King Leonidas of Sparta chose the last of those paths. In that narrow pass called the Hot Gates, where mountain and sea left only a sliver of earth for battle, he and his 300 elite Spartans prepared to meet the full wrath of Persia. They were not ignorant of the odds. They were not blind to death. They simply believed that there were things more shameful than dying. When the Persian demand came, "Surrender your weapons, submit to the great king," Leonidas answered with the immortal challenge. And with that reply, the pass of Thermopylae ceased to be mere ground. It became a stage upon which courage, discipline, and fatal glory would be tested before all of history. What truly unfolded in that narrow corridor of death? What did the Spartans face? And why did their fall become one of the most enduring legends of the ancient world? Let us turn back the centuries to Thermopylae. 10 years after the Persian defeat at Marathon, the war returned in a far more terrible form. The Persian Empire had not abandoned its ambition to subdue Greece. Under Xerxes I, son of Darius, that ambition expanded into one of the largest invasion efforts the ancient world had ever witnessed. This time, Persia came not merely to punish, but to conquer. Modern scholars estimate the invading force at 200,000 to 300,000 men, while older Greek accounts spoke of numbers exceeding 1,000,000. Whatever figure one accepts, the truth remains the same. Greece stood before a military giant. In the face of such danger, more than 30 Greek city-states joined together in an alliance that would have seemed impossible in quieter times. Old rivalries were set aside because survival demanded it. Yet, even united, the Greeks were desperately outnumbered. The task of holding the line fell to King Leonidas of Sparta, who led only around 7,000 allied troops. Against the Persian mass, no open field battle could be won. Leonidas knew that courage alone would not save Greece. If there was to be any chance at all, it would come from forcing the enemy into the wrong battlefield. That battlefield was Thermopylae. The pass was famous for its hot springs, hence the name, the Hot Gates. But in military terms, it was something even more valuable, a natural trap. With high ground pressing in from one side and the sea limiting movement on the other, the pass compressed the battlefield into a narrow corridor. At its tightest point, only a very small frontage could be held. That changed everything. Persia's numbers could no longer spread into full effect. Its cavalry, so deadly in open country, had no space to maneuver. Its strength as an empire of scale and momentum was forced into a narrow file. There, in that constricted passage, the Greeks could turn the war from a contest of quantity into a contest of quality. Thermopylae did not erase Persian strength, but it stripped away much of what made that strength terrifying. To crush Greece, Xerxes did not come with a mere army. He came with an empire in motion. His invasion force included 50,000 light infantry, 20,000 archers, 30,000 cavalry, and at its center, the dreaded 10,000 immortals, the royal guard whose ranks were never allowed to diminish. It was an army built for conquest by scale, momentum, and intimidation. But when stripped of space and forced into direct contact, the Persians revealed a serious weakness. Their soldiers were often protected by lighter linen armor, armed with shorter spears and swords, and covered by wicker shields that could not withstand sustained impact against Greek heavy infantry. Opposing them was the hardest core of the Greek world. 300 Spartans, backed by around 7,000 allied Greeks. The Spartans were not simply soldiers. They were the product of a lifelong military culture. From childhood, they were shaped into instruments of war. Their equipment reflected that purpose. Bronze breastplates, heavy shields, enclosed helmets, long thrusting spears. Every piece of Spartan gear was made for the crushing intimacy of close combat. They were built not to skirmish, but to endure impact, hold formation, and kill with methodical force. Their strength reached its highest form in the phalanx. Rank pressed into rank, shield against shield, spear extending past spear. The formation created a dense wall that was almost impossible to penetrate head-on. Under ordinary conditions, that formation could still be threatened by cavalry sweeping the flanks. But Thermopylae removed that danger. The terrain itself guarded the Greek sides, pinning the battle into a narrow front where only limited numbers could engage at once. There, Persian cavalry had little room to move, and Persian numbers could not unfold into their full strength. What remained was a direct clash. In that clash, the Persian advantages began to evaporate. Arrows lost much of their terror against bronze. Shorter weapons lost the race of reach. Lighter troops were crushed against heavier men who stood immovable behind locked shields. At the hot gates, Thermopylae became the perfect killing ground for hoplite warfare. It was the place where Persian quantity was compressed, and Spartan quality was sharpened into a blade. As the sun rose on the first day at Thermopylae, Xerxes expected obedience from fate itself. He had brought a colossal empire to the field, and before him stood only a few thousand Greeks, boxed into a narrow mountain pass. He gave the order to attack, confident that the defenders would be crushed quickly under the sheer pressure of Persian numbers. So the infantry came forward, mass after mass, crowding into the pass like a flood. But at the hot gates, flood became bottleneck. The Persians could not spread, could not surround, could not use the full terror of their scale. Instead, they were driven into a narrow front where each advance meant the same thing: a locked wall of Greek shields and a forest of longer spear. The result was catastrophic. Persian light armor could not withstand the force of the Greek thrust. Their shorter weapons left them disadvantaged before they could even strike. Men fell in ranks, and every new wave found the same fate as the last. Furious at this humiliation, Xerxes committed his most prized troops, the 10,000 immortals, the elite bodyguard of the Persian kings. If anyone could break the Greeks, it should have been them. But Thermopylae was indifferent to prestige. The immortals, too, had to advance through the same narrow gap, and there they were met by the same brutal Spartan discipline. Leonidas's men did not give way. The elite of Persia crashed against them and failed. By the second day, the battlefield had become a scene of relentless carnage. Persian assaults continued, but every attack only deepened the slaughter. Bodies piled in the pass. The gorge itself became crowded with the dead. Persian casualties soared into the thousands, then higher still. Even royal blood was spilled, as Abrachams and Hyperanthes, brothers of Xerxes, were killed in the fighting. For the Persians, the battle was beginning to feel unnatural, as if this tiny force at the pass could not be broken by ordinary means. And in truth, it could not. Not from the front. The turning point came from treachery. A local Greek named Ephialtes approached the Persian camp and revealed a hidden mountain path that bypassed the pass and led directly behind the Greek position. It was the one route that could undo everything Leonidas had built. Xerxes acted at once. Under darkness, he sent troops along the secret trail. By the third morning, they stood behind the Greek line. The defense of Thermopylae, undefeated in direct battle, had been fatally opened from the rear. When the hidden Persian force appeared behind the Greek line, Leonidas saw clearly what many commanders would not have had the courage to accept. the position was lost. The pass that had protected the Greeks for 2 days could no longer save them. Yet even in that fatal moment, there remained one final choice. Leonidas could withdraw what he could and preserve the greater Greek cause. Or he could let the entire allied army be consumed beside him. He chose sacrifice over ruin. The bulk of the Greek contingents were ordered to retreat, while Leonidas remained behind with those who would share his fate. 300 Spartans, 700 Thespians, and 900 Helots, all resolved to hold the pass until the end. The final stand was not passive, nor was it dignified in the calm sense that later ages often imagine. It was violent, raw, and full of desperate fury. Leonidas did not simply wait for the Persians to close in. He led his men in a last assault of astonishing aggression, driving into the enemy with such force that the Persians were thrown back toward the cliffs and the narrowing ground. The defenders knew they could not live, but because they knew it, they fought with a freedom no ordinary army could match. Thermopylae became a place where men already condemned turned themselves into instruments of destruction. For hours, the Greeks resisted with a determination that seemed beyond the limits of ordinary flesh. But even bronze-clad warriors bleed, and even Spartans could not fight forever against an empire. One by one, they fell. Then at last, Leonidas, king of Sparta, was struck down upon the field. His fall was more than the death of a commander. It was the fall of the symbol around which the defense had stood. The Persians surged forward, desperate to seize his body and claim it as a trophy of conquest. But they had misunderstood the men before them. The surviving Spartans and their companions rallied around Leonidas with a loyalty that no fear could break. Again and again, they repelled Persian attempts to drag him away. They fought over his corpse with the last of their breath, as though even death itself must not be allowed to dishonor him. No Spartan ran. No Spartan submitted. They remained what they had always been, warriors of the line, faithful unto death. The death that opened the road to victory at first glance. Thermopylae looks like a defeat. The pass was lost. Leonidas was killed. The Spartans were overwhelmed. But history is not always decided by who stands at the end of the day. Sometimes it is decided by what a sacrifice makes possible. By holding the hot gates, Leonidas and his men delayed the Persian advance at the most critical moment of the war. That delay gave Athens time to evacuate and gave the Greek alliance time to gather itself for the struggle ahead. When Xerxes finally marched into Athens, he entered not a broken city, but an empty one. The people had escaped, and the war was far from over. Even more importantly, Thermopylae gave Greece a story powerful enough to unite it. The stand of Leonidas turned fear into fury. The Greeks did not crumble after the pass fell. They rose higher. Within months, they struck Persia at Salamis, where the Persian fleet was broken in the narrow waters. Then, in 479 B.C., they crushed Persian ambitions for good at Plataea. Thermopylae did not end the war. It lit the flame that carried Greece through it. The epitaph of the fallen, though brief in time, Thermopylae became immense in memory. It came to symbolize courage under impossible odds, the strategic use of terrain against overwhelming force, and above all, the willingness to die for freedom. To the Spartans, death in obedience to the law was not a loss of meaning. It was the fulfillment of it. So the Greeks raised a monument to those who fell, and on that stone they carved words that have echoed through history ever since. Go, tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. It is one of the simplest epitaphs ever written, and one of the most powerful. More than 2.5 millennia later, the last stand at Thermopylae still burns in the imagination of the world. Was Leonidas truly the ultimate warrior king? Or is Thermopylae remembered because it revealed the deepest truth of war, that a doomed stand can still shape victory? Tell us what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you never miss our next historical deep dive. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next battle.